The PA Empowerment Network is a game changer, uniting individuals with shared goals to support and uplift each other, providing resources, mentorship, and a sense of community. Empowering people means giving them the tools and confidence to thrive and create positive change in their lives and communities.
All right, good evening. At 5 o'clock, time to rock. You know what time it is. We're going to get into some Politrics. And guess what? My man is back. He went out on vacation and he decided to come back and say hello. So I'm going to bring him up. What's happening, Mr. Ronald Yates? How are you?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I like to always start off to say I'm grateful for something. Well, today I'm grateful for something. I got an opportunity to live another year. So today's my birthday.
And happy birthday to you.
You know all the struggles that I've had to go through over this year. So, yeah, man, this is one of them times I could say I didn't know the day was going to come, but it's here. You know,
it is here.
Hopefully we get to keep on rolling. So that's what I'm grateful for, to see another day come in. Yeah. Just to the viewing audience, thank you very much for tuning in to Stevenson and Yates on the Empowerment PA Network. Hope you guys stick around and do me a favor. Before you guys leave, hit the subscribe button. Okay. So this week on Stevenson and Yates, we got a lot of things going on. We got what was going on down in Israel. They're having a war. That war has been going on for a minute, though, hasn't it, brother?
Well, yeah. Israel has existed as a state since 1948. And in that time, that past 77 years, Israel has never been not at war with one of its neighbors, right? This is something that is part of a much larger and grander scheme. But we'll get into that.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, Israel over there seems to be at war with everybody, man. Is this really gonna disrupt the way things are going in the Middle East? Are we looking for World War III because of the way things are going over there?
Well, I'll tell you something. We could very well be looking at World War III because this situation is going to get bigger. Other nations, I believe, will be drawn into this conflict because for years, Israel has, with the backing of the United States, France, England, Israel has had basically carte blanche to do whatever they chose to do in that region called the Middle East, which is really just Northeast Africa. Mm-hmm. But they've been given carte blanche to do whatever they want. And with this war between Iran and Israel, this is something that has been planned for some time. If you go back and you listen to some of Prime Minister Netanyahu's speeches, he's been talking about going to war or bombing Iran since far back as 1993. So the alleged attack by Hamas in October of 2023, the subsequent bombings of places like Lebanon, Syria, and now the war with Iran, these are all calculated steps. These things have been planned for years. And now, basically, he's been given a green light by the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm.
But why?
Are we supplying arms? We still supplying them with arms?
We are, right. Arms and, of course, financial backing. But if you delve into what's actually going on, it's not just Israel's justification for this war is they say that Iran poses an existential threat to Israel's safety and security. The reality is this has nothing to do with this nuclear threat. This is something that, we've been saying for years now, that Iran is just months away from a nuclear bomb or a nuclear weapon. Well, it's been years now, and Iran has yet to show or produce a nuclear weapon. That's not what this is about. The reason that we're currently at war in Iran, or Israel's currently at war, and we will soon be at war, is because
let's hope that we're not gonna go, man.
well, there are already carriers in the region, and right now, the Trump administration has ordered additional resources into the area. So this is just a matter of time. You know, the reason that this is happening is because the only military in the region right now that can threaten Israel is Iran. Iran has a large military. I think they have somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million active and reserve soldiers. So, they represent a formidable force. Israel wants them gone because Israel wants to expand well beyond the borders of Israel, beyond Gaza. They need land because every year they're inviting more and more settlers to come back to Israel. They need land, they need sources of fresh water. They also want to create a buffer zone between themselves and what they say are their Arab neighbors who are
Trump needs a place to build his luxury buildings and hotels. He's got to have that. So,
and see, that's another part of it. Basically, Trump and Netanyahu have basically divided up the land of Gaza, right? Or what remains of Gaza. Netanyahu wants to, of course, establish settlements. Trump, on the other hand, wants to build what he calls the Riviera of the Middle East. So, they're looking past the fact that this has been the home of the Palestinians for centuries. They're looking past the fact that there are still some Palestinians still within the region. But
and the whole irony of it is they came here as guests.
Well, isn't that how it always starts? I mean, Columbus came to this hemisphere. He was a guest, right? And he was greeted by the indigenous people. They were curious as to, well, who are these strange individuals? During that time, I'm talking about Columbus, the indigenous population, they probably had a ratio of thousands to one. They could have slaughtered. Because, they came on their ships, then they had to get on small boats to come ashore. They could have attacked those boats, and there's really nothing Columbus and his men could have done to fend them off. But that's how it always starts, right? They come, they assess your weaknesses, and they capitalize on them. And that's what Israel has done. That's what the Europeans have done throughout the planet. But, getting back to Netanyahu, he wants to expand the borders of Israel. And if Iran is out of the way, what's to stop him from taking, say, Lebanon, taking Syria, taking what remains of Palestine, and then, spreading further east, west, north, south? Who's going to stop him if Iran no longer poses any resistance to him? So that is the long-term plan. I was watching a documentary, and they talked about Eretz Yisrael, or the expansion of Israel. In fact, there's a good documentary called 1948, Creation and Catastrophe. And it talks about what happened when the nation of Israel was given statehood, what was going on inside of Palestine, the slaughter of the Palestinians, the taking of land. And there's another documentary I saw recently where a lot of the land that is being purchased in Gaza is being purchased by American Jews, right? Who are just going online, looking at property and buying it. And then these people are evicted from their homes. And this practice has been going on for the last 77 years.
It seems like Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
It does. And if you go into Williamsburg now, you see that the territory has expanded, right?
That's right.
Yeah. I mean,
they're up Broadway, and you go all the way down almost to the bridge, man. They occupy all of that entire area. They got the schools there, they got their transportation there, they got their shops and stores all out. Yeah, man, they occupy the entire area.
And once they get in, they don't actually want to live with anybody except other Jews, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you notice, the people that lived there for years, when I was growing there, when you were growing up there, people are now, how housing prices either soared or the property value dropped so low that they had to sell and move out. And it's pretty much the same sort of thing in Israel or in Gaza, except that the part of that's missing in America is that there's a gun pointed at the head of the Palestinians. Give up the land or we're going to take it by force.
Well, they're
right?
also with Iraq now too. It's Iran. It's Iraq. It's all the entire Middle East. The Arabs, everybody's. They just seem to be at war. Did you hear? What was it? Last Thursday, they had a bombing with the bombs, boom, 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 bursting in air. They attacked. What is it? Who attacked who first?
You mean in this Israel-Iran conflict?
Yeah. This latest one.
This was Iran. I'm sorry, Israel that launched a preemptive strike, and they're saying that they did this because Iran poses an existential threat if Iran is allowed to gain a nuclear weapon. So they launched this preemptive strike. They said they targeted some of Iran's nuclear sites and their nuclear scientists. I think what's going to happen, one, America will get involved in this conflict. We always have, right? When Israel gets in trouble,
I really hope we don't.
Well,
people don't know what war really is. They got this idea in their head about what war really is, and it's like television version. And I want to tell you, you get in conflicts, man. It's nothing like what you see on television. You're talking about sending people over there to lose their lives so you can build a hotel.
Well, yeah, and realistically, since the 19th century, or the turn of the century, that's what America's been doing. America has been the world's policeman, but also the world's bully. And Israel has a great deal of control in this country. And I think that for somebody like Trump, if he were to hesitate to get into this war, of course, the pro-Israel lobby, groups like AIPAC, groups like the ADL, would of course be putting enormous pressure on him to get into the fight. Because Israel I don't think they can withstand the might of the Iranian military alone. I think they realize that they need the assistance of the United States.
Of course they do. They need our money, they need our weaponry, they need our technology.
They need the weapons and they need the money, right?
And we're willing to give it to them.
Right, because in order to fight a war, you need to constantly resupply the arms, right? The bombs, the fuel, all of that, and it's not cheap. So America's basically been Israel's, Israel's defense mechanism as well as Israel's piggy bank. So that is what Netanyahu had hoped for, and it seems as if what he hoped for is coming to fruition. The ships have been redirected to that region. And of course, there's always a carrier too in that area for this reason specifically. We had this ongoing situation with the Houthis where the U.S. was bombing in Yemen. Well, these ships are in the area already. So just redeploying them, into the region around Iran and to begin bombing in coordination with Israel. I think that the broader implications for the U.S. are the fact that I think that a lot of times our military planners or our government underestimates the strength of the enemy.
Now, most governments do. They really do. They even look at Ukraine.
Right.
Okay? Now Russia thought they'd be in there in and out.
Right.
What's it been now? For 3 years now?
Right. Well, I was thinking in terms of Vietnam, right? We said we'll be
Yeah.
in and out of Vietnam in weeks, right? And then I think it went from weeks to 6 months, and this war dragged on for 10 years, right? So I think we,
Well, we went in
underestimated.
there, when we first went to Vietnam, we went in there as advisors. That's what they had us do. They had us go in, and we were supposed to assess and advise and train. How
Well,
we ended up, I think probably Nixon or one of them cats got us really into the war.
well, it was actually LBJ, right? That
Okay.
because during that time, um, Kennedy did not want to go into Vietnam, but the plans had already been laid, so Kennedy had to go. And then
Mhm.
LBJ basically said, "You want your war, you got it, because I want to keep my head on my shoulders. So you go ahead." But even before we were actually at war with Vietnam, in terms of a shooting war, we were already at war with Vietnam.
Mhm.
Dr. King said in one of his speeches that America was footing 80% of the bill for France to fight their war with the Vietnamese. Now, why would we be supporting France's war? It doesn't make sense. In fact, that is kind of what led to us going off of the gold standard because France began to ask questions. France had money in Fort Knox, their gold reserve in Fort Knox. And they began to ask questions like, well, look, America, where are you getting all this money to fight this war in Southeast Asia?
Hmm.
And they demanded that their gold be returned to them. Well, at that time, Nixon said, you know what, we're going to go off the gold standard. That's what led to that, the fact that France wanted their money back out of Fort Knox.
Right.
But, in terms of Israel and the United States and this potential war with
Just give me a
Iran.
second or two, brother. We got to pay the bill. So when we come
Sure.
back, we'll run that clip, and this way people can see what the hell is going on over there. What war looks like. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Chantel Davis from Willie Mae's Place and Legacy Vines Winery, located in Gilbert, Pennsylvania. We're the only restaurant and winery experience where we pair delicious homemade scratch kitchen Southern comfort food with delicious homemade wine. All of our tastings will include some type of food and wine portion pairing, so definitely check us out. You can visit us at williemaysplace.com, legacyvineswinery.com, and also follow us on our socials, Willie Mae's Place Restaurant. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah, man, I'm going to stop by the winery, the Legacy Winery that they got. I just want to go down and take a look, see what it's like. I mean, I really like the Willie Mae's restaurant, but I want to see what their winery looks like. All right, back to the story at hand, which we were talking about Israel and the war, the conflict that's going on between Israel and Iraq. I'm gonna run a little clip for you, and then you can break it down for us, okay?
Okay.
Overnight, wave after wave of Iranian drones bearing down on Tel Aviv.
Hundreds of Marines have landed in Los Angeles to guard federal property and personnel. They were deployed there by President Trump this week, along with National Guard troops, despite objections from California Governor Gavin Newsom.
He is not a monarch. He is not a king.
Southern California has been the center of nationwide protests this week over federal immigration raids.
Now, that protest was also part of what's going on in Israel with their war and a conflict. So let me just make sure I get to the right place. It's hard to be Terry sometimes.
Yeah.
Right, here we go.
Overnight, wave after wave of Iranian drones bearing down on Tel Aviv. Most were intercepted. Those that got through destroyed homes and shops. Israel was quick to retaliate, targeting an oil refinery and hitting buildings in Tehran. There have been casualties on both sides. At least 12 Israelis were killed this weekend, but that toll was dwarfed by the damage Israel inflicted on Iran, with almost 100 civilian deaths nearly 30 of them children, and the assassination of top military commanders and scientists. The surprise Israeli strikes began on Thursday. Israel wants to cripple Iran's nuclear capability, already hitting 4 major facilities, Natanz, Tabriz, Isfahan, and Fordo, as well as key energy sites. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not done yet. Nahonivga Behorn, what they have felt so far, he said, is nothing compared to what's coming.
Hey, man. See, and this is why I asked you the question about, we looking to have a World War III over there, man? Because what is he fighting, a war on 2 fronts?
Well, in terms of Gaza, Gaza has no military, never has, right? Israel has completely disarmed the population of Gaza. So the question will come up, well, what about Hamas? I think that Hamas was created by people like the Israeli government, like their intelligence gathering agencies, Mossad, right? Because let's be realistic. Israel, it says in the clip, targeted Iranian nuclear scientists and their military leadership, command and control structures, right? Mm-hmm. How did Israel know where they are? Mm-hmm. The answer is Mossad has infiltrated into Iran and has human intelligence gathering capabilities inside Iran and giving them, real-time movements of the nuclear scientists as well as the military officials. Now, how is it?
Spies? I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Absolutely, they have spies. But how is it? How is it that Israel can pinpoint nuclear scientists in Iran and their command and control structures, as well as their military personnel, but they couldn't see Hamas, right, in Israel infiltrating in tunnels? Come on, that's ridiculous. Mossad is the best at gathering intel, hands down. I think they're much better than the CIA. Mm-hmm. And yet they did not see this imminent attack coming in October of 2023. That's ridiculous.
I think they saw it, and I think they let it happen.
And they did let it happen. And look what's happened. They've taken...
Just so they can go to war.
And they could take all of Gaza, and they have it. They're forcing the Gazans out, trying to figure out now where will the remaining people go. They
don't care about how many hundreds of thousands of people that died. It doesn't matter.
Does not matter. They killed 57,000 already in the past 2 years. And each day, the numbers are going up.
Did you see them over there trying to get food? Begging for food in the streets?
Right. Because they stopped the aid truck. In fact, there was a flotilla that was heading to Gaza to bring aid. And on it was the young lady from, I believe she's from the Netherlands, Greta Thunberg. She was going there to provide aid and assistance. Israel stopped the flotilla and turned them around, would not allow them to bring aid into the country. So for Israel, their prestige in the world, their reputation has changed dramatically. So many countries now are looking at the situation between Israel and the Palestinians, and they realize there's no justification.
No.
Zero. There was no provocation on behalf of the Iranians for Israel to attack in the first place. How are you going to say, well, I think you have nuclear weapons, so because of that, I'm going to launch a flight of bombers and I'm going to lob missiles into your country based on my assumption that you have nuclear weapons and that you're going to use those weapons to do me harm. That's simply the justification that Israel is using. It's much deeper. They need and want more land, and they're going to take it if they can get Israel.
And I'm going to tell you something. Nobody's going to hold them accountable for anything.
Absolutely
all,
not.
all the deaths, all the people that died, all the atrocities and all the things that their soldiers were accused of doing with the rapes and shooting the babies in the head and all the things that nobody is going to be accountable for it. No one.
And that's why the world has turned its back basically on Israel. A lot of some of the countries in Europe will not do business with them anymore. They're not buying Israeli products anymore. And in this country, along with the protests going on the West Coast and in New York and the cities across the nation, there have been protests in places like Israel and even in this country against supporting Israeli products and countries or companies rather that do business with Israel. So, you have a number of ongoing protests against Israel. And now you have these protests that are becoming larger and more vocal against the Trump administration and the, I guess, the roundup of American citizens at the hands of ICE.
Because a lot of these ICE characters, they want to call themselves, they're not carrying badges, they're not having any proper identification. I think that's probably Trump's henchmen, if you want to say, going out there to snatch up these kids, because they don't know if they're using these kids for human trafficking or whatever, man. I mean, I think if I see them, I'm gonna ask them for identification and make sure that they are who they are.
But
there could be some clowns doing some human trafficking.
But you know what? That is what happened. I just saw today that the comptroller from New York City, Brad Lander, was walking a client out of court, and ICE approached his client or the client. And Brad Lander asked, "Do you have a warrant?" Brad Lander was arrested. I guess he was charged with interfering. Now, as you know, my background is in law enforcement. Obstruction or interference requires some sort of physical obstruction. Asking a question in no way obstructs an officer from effecting a legal and lawful arrest. You're allowed to ask any question. This is still a country that has some degree of freedom of speech.
And if Trump has his way, it's going to be martial law. He's probably going to change the Constitution, and then at that point, you can forget about freedom of speech.
Well,
he's already messing with the press, man. Look, taking away their powers of freedom of speech. People are not literally, but more or less jumping ship, man. Because this guy's pulling their license and all kind of nonsense.
Well, here's the thing, and I've said this before. Come 2026, we're going to have the midterm elections, right? With these protests becoming larger and across the country, Trump has to realize it'll be extremely difficult for him to maintain control over the House and the Senate. He has to know that. So what he's doing is he's already setting up his rationale for martial law. He's already got Marines in California.
700 Marines,
which is illegal.
And
the Politrics Act says that active duty military cannot perform law enforcement functions within the United States.
That's true. Cannot. And this is what I heard, that they're trying to get around it. So they say, well, we're not actually arresting the person. We're just detaining them for law enforcement to come and then take them away. But to me, you put cuffs somebody, I can't go left or right, up or down, man. I'm under arrest.
Well, according to the law, right? If a police officer comes up to you and tells you, "I need you to stay here," even though you're not in cuffs, but that police officer tells you cannot leave, under the Constitution, you are under arrest at that point. Anytime you believe that your freedom of movement is greatly restricted and you believe you cannot leave, then you are in your mind under arrest. So what they're doing is, it's a thinly veiled attempt at saying, well, you know what? They're not actually performing police functions. Yes, they are.
Yes,
And,
they are.
for Trump to say that California would be burning, that's a wild exaggeration.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's a lie. They showed the other day where there were venues going on just blocks from this protest. BET had their awards.
Mm-hmm.
Other venues were happening within blocks of this event. This was not a situation where people were in fear for their safety. But I think what Trump is doing is setting up his rationale for declaring martial law. Once 2026 comes around and we get close to the midterm elections, I suspect either in the weeks before or leading up to, Trump will declare martial law and shut down the election, saying it's just too dangerous to be in the streets.
Mm-hmm. Or we'll have a war, and wartime presidents a little different. They don't have elections during a war, right?
Well, we are going to be in a war. At least that's the way it appears at this point. Because Trump was at the G7. He left early to come back to this country, back to Washington, and he assembled the National Security Council. So, and he made a threat to Tehran saying that they should leave. He made a threat to Iran saying that people should leave Tehran, right? So he's made this threat. And at this point, because of this whole taco thing where Trump always chickens out, I guess he feels now he has to go forward with his threat and carry out this action against Iran. Well, Iran has said when Israel fired its first missile that this was an act of war. Tehran or the Iranians have no choice but to fight. None whatsoever, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no alternative. At this point, there's no deal on the table. And then that's another thing, right? Trump asked the Iranians to sit down and work out a nuclear deal. A nuclear deal that he said was wrong under Obama.
He killed the first one. Didn't he kill it?
Right. He did. And now he wants to have another agreement with Iran. Basically, what he's saying is, hey, guys, look, just give up your weapons, your nuclear aspirations. Well, for somebody like the Ukrainians, Ukraine was developing nuclear weapons. They had a nuclear program. Well, they entered into an agreement with the United States and NATO saying basically, look, if you give up your nuclear weapons, we, NATO and the United States, will protect you. Well, look at the conditions in Ukraine. Ukraine agreed, signed off on this agreement, and now NATO is backing out because America is saying we're no longer going to fund foreign wars. We're not going to commit our troops to foreign wars or our money for that matter. Mm-hmm. Yet we're going to do it in Israel. Why the difference?
Isn't that the border between one or the other, or isn't that like that line?
Well, the difference is that
all further into the Middle East. Isn't that like that little border, that little stop right there?
Well, the difference is this. In Ukraine, American businesses and corporate or multinational corporations have basically got the wealth, extracted the wealth of Ukraine. There's nothing there for America to get anymore. They entered into an agreement with Zelensky a few months back to extract their rare earth minerals, right? Yeah. So for the U.S., there's no longer any interest there anymore, so we don't care. And then there's the fact that Trump had this ongoing bromance with Vladimir Putin.
Mm-hmm.
Israel, on the other hand, is a little different. Israel has a great deal of influence in America, more than we think. You know, if you go and you look at the Federal Reserve, the chairperson of the Federal Reserve, if you look at all of them, from the first chairperson to the current person in charge of the Federal Reserve, they all have one thing in common. And do you know what that one thing is?
They're all Jewish.
Exactly. So if you have people in charge of the Federal Reserve, which has a great deal of influence.
And it's not a department, or it's not actually government related.
It's not. It's a privately owned bank, right? And they determine things like interest rates, right? They control the flow of money into and out of the economy. So if you have that sort of influence over America, you basically can tell America what to do, and America has no choice but to get in line.
Well, America's sure got in line here, brother. I could just tell you that, man. I'm just glad that at least over in Africa, them brothers and sisters, they're actually trying to create that unified Africa. They're trying to make that United States of Africa.
They are. And you know something? The other day, Trump, he got in touch with the president, or the chairman of the North Korean Communist Party, Kim Jong-un. And he said he wanted to talk to him. Kim Jong-un said, we ain't got nothing to talk about, and hung up the phone. So, you know, all across the world, right, people are recognizing what's going on. North Korea has troops in Ukraine that are fighting side by side with Russian troops. So North Korea is looking at the situation, and they're seeing not just America's expansion, but the Israeli expansion as well. I would not be surprised to see North Korea provide assistance to the Iranians. If America is drawn into this conflict, I can see North Korea saying we're going to send troops, money, and equipment to assist the Iranians. Because, I mean, let's be realistic, right? You have Israel on one side and America attacking on the other. You know, Iran would basically be sitting ducks. But if you have other countries that are going to be drawn into this conflict that are saying we've got to arrest these land grabs, and it's all across the globe. America said, look, we want Canada. We want Greenland. We want the Panama Canal, right? Israel is they've taken Gaza. They bombed Syria.
What's
they
coming?
bombed Lebanon.
That everybody wants so much land that they want to grab. Or what the hell is coming, man? That's what I'm asking. World War III? Is that, because that's kind of what it sounds like is coming.
And it is, right? I mean, let's be realistic. Some of the conditions that we see today are some of the same conditions that existed during World War I and World War II. When Hitler was elected chairman, and then later after the death of Bismarck, he became the absolute leader, Führer of Germany. He said that one thing the Germans need is Lebensraum, or living space. So they began to annex countries around them, Austria, Czechoslovakia. And of course, once the British and the French offered no resistance, he just began to take more. And if you look across the landscape of Europe, Romania wants land. Other countries in Europe want more land. Populations are growing. Growing populations, you need food, you need land, you need sources of water.
You know, with all these hundreds of thousands of people that seem to be dying every day, I just can't understand how the population is growing faster than we're killing them.
Well, it's interesting. So in Europe, right, the populations aren't really growing that fast. In fact, their birth rate is down around a 0 birth rate. But in places like India, India has 2 billion people. China, 2 billion people. And if the current trend continues, Africa will eclipse both of them within the next few years, right? So that's a problem for Europeans, right? The fact that the population of Black and brown people are exploding and the European birth rate is so slow. People are aging and living longer, right? And older people aren't having any children, and young people are finding it very, very difficult economically and socially, and even medically to have children. So it's a huge problem But for those populations, you have to understand that these countries have been carved out, right? So you had Czechoslovakia. Now you have the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Well, if Slovakia is on land that isn't very fertile, how do they grow food? Where are they going to get it from? For Europe, in terms of resources, they don't have very much. They have what they stole from Africa. But in terms of their own resources, they don't. Most of the natural gas that powers Europe comes from Russia. So America, of course, wants to get Russia out of the energy business so that we can sell natural gas and other fuel to Europe. But they don't have very much, so they got to buy from Russia. They have to import gas from us or from the Middle East. And the price, well, it's controlled by Arabs. They don't like that very much.
And then I'm gonna tell you, you look at everything. We could talk about what's going on around the world, but even right here in America, man. I mean, look at what's going on with the tariffs, with the messing with your Social Security, messing with your Medicaid. I hear people all the time, man. They're really nervous about what's going on here and how we're going to survive here. And us as Black people, what's going to happen to us? We always seem to be at the bottom of the barrel anyway.
Well, as for Black folks, we know how to survive because this is nothing new to us. We were born here for the most part, probably the vast majority of us, in chains, and we survived that. We survived 400 years of slavery. We survived Jim Crow. We survived segregation. So we know how to survive, right? I mean, stuff that you wouldn't feed to your dog, we took and managed to make a meal out of it that kept us alive. We understand the reality. We know what to do. We know from our grandparents and great-grandparents how to survive. Others who never been, or aren't familiar with that kind of struggle, aren't going to fare so well. So they should be nervous because Trump is very, very unpredictable. Just the other day or just weeks ago, he said, listen, we're not going to send ICE raids into places like agricultural areas. We're not going to affect the tourism industry. We're not going to go into hotels looking for people who may be some so-called illegals, right? Well, today he just reversed that. And now they're going to go to the farms. They're going to look for people, farm workers, who, of course, are not criminals, but he's going to have them deported. And, the reason he's doing this is because Obama was called the deporter in chief. He just wants to be able to say, I deported more than Obama. It doesn't matter that these people are criminals. It doesn't matter that he's trying to kick out a 4-year-old child who has a medical condition that if she leaves this country will die within hours. Doesn't matter to him, just so he could say, listen, I did more deportations than Barack Obama.
So this is all about, all about ego.
His ego's so fragile, he cannot live with the fact that Obama's called a deporter in chief. When he came to office the first time, it was the Affordable Care Act was called Obamacare. And because of that, it had to go. Not that it did not provide health care for people who had none. Just the fact that his name was not associated with it. So it had to go. So
all
now
right, we're gonna have to pick this up on the other end. My family is already here.
Okay.
Time to go hang out and enjoy the rest of my birthday.
All right. Well, you do that, brother.
All right. Do you watch basketball?
I watched a little game last night.
Yeah, it's a good game.
Yeah.
All right. So to all the viewers, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to hit that subscribers button. We really appreciate it. Give us a like, a subscribe. We'll take whatever you can give us because we're trying to stay on the air. We're trying to continue to do what we do as being a community service and to keep you informed. My man Ronald Yates, I'm Kendall Stevenson. This is Politricking. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, you got to be who you are because everybody else is taken. And my man Ron says, peace.